There's a valley where lights move without sound and children write without speaking. I've seen the tape. I've heard the breath. Whatever lives above Greystone isn't visiting, it's listening. I started with a box that smelled like wet cardboard and old library glue. A torn banker's box with Greystone scrawled in pencil deep enough to scar the lid. Inside were manila folders, soft at the corners, cloudy cassette cases, Polaroids that had gone a little green, and a paper sleeve stamped FOIA in blue. A retired dispatcher named Alma called me about it after she heard one of my stories and said my voice sounded like somebody who'd sit with hard things instead of naming them wrong. She told me if I promised not to use her last name, she'd show me where the file room key still lived. Greystone is a valley with more fog than seems fair and a river that bends 3 times like it's changing its mind. Granite shows through the soil in long seams that look like bones. In winter, the western ridge throws a shadow that reaches the highway before most folks get home from work. On a map, the place looks like a cup with a chipped lip where the ridge breaks open. People in the next county say you can get lost here without moving. I laid the contents of the box out on my dining table while Lauren and Emma were at the park. I made a timeline because I don't trust dots until they try to draw a line on their own. The oldest papers were wafer thin and crisp. Newer ones had that cheap office feel and a faint haze from a toner cartridge nobody replaced when they should have. Across the decades, the language kept changing like people were reaching for the closest word and then dropping it when it didn't quite fit. Discs, orbs, walkers, visitors. Nobody agreed, and that part felt honest. The earliest police report was from the late 60s. A deputy with stubborn, tidy handwriting wrote about 3 lights over a hayfield south of town. They moved in a triangle and held still without sound, then they slid sideways like magnets nudged on glass. He underlined no sound twice. He'd drawn the triangle and marked north with a neat N. An hour later, he took the farmer's statement. The man told him he felt something in his teeth while the lights were overhead, like a cord held just outside hearing. He didn't have the language for it, so he wrote what he could. Recent reports were bolder because the forms gave people boxes. Strange light. Animal injury. Missing time. A state ag form even had little cartoon cows, which made me put my head in my hands. Jokes are easy until you see the pattern hiding under them. Livestock turned up drained without mess. Fences hadn't been cut. Dogs that usually scratched to get out refused to cross the mat. A school nurse gathered 3 drawings in a week from different kids. Each showed the same figure with polished stone eyes and a line where a mouth should be. When she asked what it said, the kids wrote sentences on the back without moving their lips. She underlined that part because, what else do you do? I drove out to Greystone on a Tuesday that felt full of held breath. Fog sat in the fields like quilt batting. Frost clung to ditch grass in a low glitter. Alma met me outside the old township building. Green rain jacket, faded ball cap, quick step, no wasted words. We went inside through a hall that smelled like wax and paper. She led me down a narrow stair to a records room with 2 lights out and 1 buzzing. The key lived in a coffee can behind a stack of surplus binders. She let me unlock the door because it would feel better if my hand did it. There were shelves of boxes. 4 wore the Greystone label. Alma's palm rested on the first one for a second like you might touch a sleeping animal to see if it was breathing. "You could have tossed these when you retired," I said. She shook her head.
"Some things feel too heavy for the trash."
We carried 1 box upstairs and set it under a window. Figures crossed the lot outside and turned into drifting shadows on the ceiling. Alma poured coffee from a dented thermos and sat across from me.
"They came in waves,"
she said.
"Months would go by with nothing but speeders and noise complaints. Then 2 weeks of lights and callers with shaky voices. People we knew. People who didn't talk like that about anything."
I asked about the Air Force memo. She tapped the paper sleeve. Her hand shook a little.
"That came through a cousin of a cousin. He worked maintenance at an airfield the government stopped admitting existed the same year I learned to type. He got a stack of scan jobs one winter and kept a copy of the one with our town on it because he thought it was funny anyone cared about this place. Years later, his wife told him she didn't want it in the house. He gave it to me. I didn't look at it for a long time."
We read it together. Black redaction lines looked like planks nailed over windows. The date was late 70s. The heading said Greystone anomalies and a string of numbers. One paragraph that hadn't been blacked out mentioned low-altitude lights over the valley and unexplained radar interference on humid nights. It used a line that made the hair on my arms lift. Target returns demonstrate non-ballistic motion. Another page referenced a rural patrol unit reporting vehicle failure while a light hovered near the hood. They called it anecdotal and flagged it for follow-up that didn't exist in the packet.
That one was Owen.
Alma said.
He died 5 years ago. He used to bring us persimmons in a grocery bag every fall and leave them by the coffee maker.
Did he ever talk about that night? She took a sip she didn't need.
He said the engine went flat like a battery tossed in a sink. He said a pearl hung just above his hood. Radio died. His voice didn't carry. He could hear his watch tick, and that's what scared him.
We drove 2 miles to a farm that pressed up against the woods where the river bends the second time. A man in canvas coveralls met us at the gate. Wool cap, kind eyes, the posture you get from weather.
This is Buck.
Alma said.
He's been the one who finds things around here for a long time.
He shook my hand.
You picked a quiet day.
We walked along a fence while he told me about a heifer that went missing in early spring. No broken wire, no tracks that made sense. He found the carcass 2 days later propped in the willow's shade without a drop on the dirt. He didn't like telling that part. People either laughed or stared like he was selling something. Could coyotes have dragged it?
They'll take what they can.
He said.
I've seen their work. This was neat. The dogs wouldn't go near that tree for a week. I had to bribe them with bacon, and that trick's never failed for anything else that walks.
We crossed a swale where the ground felt soft under the grass. He pointed at a line across the field.
They stood there that night. Lights like a string of lanterns, only wrong. Too steady. No sway. No smoke. No sound. They moved like one thing, then broke apart and sat over the tree line like they were thinking.
His voice cracked. He cleared his throat like something small had lodged there.
I raised 2 kids on this land.
He said.
I've pulled calves with one hand while the other was dialing the vet. I've watched storms walk the hills like cattle. I don't love spooky stories. There's something in this valley that doesn't attend to us the way everything else does.
On the drive back, Alma pointed out houses where people had called sightings in. A lot of wind chimes, a lot of curtains that moved even though the day was still. A kid in a red sweatshirt knelt by a tricycle with a strip of silver tape and a plastic ruler. He was laying out a triangle on the sidewalk. At the school, the nurse's office smelled like rubbing alcohol and crayons. Her name was Lila. She wore her hair in a braid thick enough to throw a line with. She pulled a folder from a locked drawer, drawings on printer paper. Each one had a gray figure in the middle. The kids could have chosen any color. They chose gray.
I don't prompt them,
she said.
I ask how they're sleeping. I ask about breakfast. I ask what's on their mind and wait. When they show me these, I ask what the person said. They don't answer out loud. They always write.
She handed me the top page. On the back, a careful hand had written, "Will come when the air is quiet." The letters were straight, no wobble. Another said, "We know your name." Another said, "We don't use mouths." Several had nothing written, just fence-like marks along the margin.
They do that while they think,
Lila said.
It's like humming for them. They mark the edge until they decide if I'm safe.
Have you seen the lights? She nodded.
Twice. Once from my porch. Once through the back window while I rocked a feverish kid who kept saying he was too hot for his skin. My husband said drones. I told him to bring me a drone that can sit without a breath of noise, drop like a bead, and stop just above the road. He didn't have an answer. We love each other, but we don't agree on this.
Back at the township building, Alma went hunting for a VHS player because the last item in the box needed one. A black tape in a cracked clamshell labeled Rivers Family Picnic with a mid-90s date. A note tucked inside said, "This is the one from the porch." I called Lauren to say I might be late if the road glazed over and promised to bring milk. I told her the valley felt like a room right after a tone stops ringing. She knows how to hear me when I talk like that. The portable TV looked like something borrowed from a church basement. The VCR breathed the tape down, and I waited for the old fear that it might eat it. Static rolled once, then a yard, picnic table under a maple. A camcorder's jitter from a wrist that didn't belong to a cinematographer. Kids ran through frame with paper cups. Someone said the potato salad was fine and everyone should stop complaining and eat it. Summer air baked the sound. For a minute, everything was ordinary and the worst thing in the room was sugar. The camera panned across the yard to the maple. Leaves turned the light a clear green. The image lingered. The lens stepped down a notch. The light changed as if a cloud moved over the sun, only the shadows sharpened instead of softening. Alma shifted in her chair. The screen darkened. The audio dropped without lag, like someone had pulled a blanket over the day. 3 points slid in from the top of the frame, perfect spacing. They moved with a kind of intent that made my shoulders inch inward. Small, then not. They paused above the maple like they could smell sap. "Wait," a woman said. Not calm, not terrified. The voice you use when something steps into a nursery that shouldn't be there. The picture hiccuped. The points stretched for a beat and smeared like lights behind tears. They snapped back. The left one dipped as if testing water. The image shuddered. Then the world went black. We held our breath for a 10 count. The tape kept running. The camera recorded what came next. A shoe scuffed old porch boards. The screen door gave a tiny quiver like a finger had touched the mesh. Breathing swelled right beside the microphone, too close to belong to anyone in the yard. The sound moved from center to right like a head turning near your ear. The person holding the camera whispered "hey," and the breath blew straight into the mic so hard the little TV speakers broke into a fuzzy rattle. Then the day snapped back. A child squealed that the lights were gone. A man said it was a trick and didn't sound like he believed himself. A dog cried and someone told it to hush in a voice that kept hitting the same note. We rewound and listened again, same steps, same breath. The same close sound that makes your hand hover above a doorknob that won't turn. Alma rubbed her forearm like the room had cooled.
The woman who brought it in won't sit while it plays,
She said.
She waits in the hall and asks if anything changed. It hasn't. She kept it in her freezer for years because someone told her that would help. It didn't.
I went to the Rivers house after sunset because I wanted to stand on the porch. The boards flexed under me. A wind chime hung from a hook and didn't move. The maple had grown and filled the patch of sky where the lights had hovered. A woman in a cardigan opened the door with the tired look people get when sleep's become a negotiation. We sat in the front room. Heat came from a register that clicked like an insect. She said the picnic was the last time her brother came home before he took a job out of state. She wanted the tape because it proved they'd all been together. The first time she played it again, she shut it off and put it away. A year later, same thing. The breathing made the room feel smaller. What do you think the lights were? She looked toward the porch and tilted her head like she was listening.
I don't pick that word,
She said.
People will pick it for you if you try. I know the house got strange after that day. We learned to move together without talking. It felt like we'd gotten new neighbors who kept their lights off and all their windows open.
She handed me a paper envelope with a photo from the same day. The picnic table, the maple, kids with sticky hands. In the top left corner, where the sky made a triangle between branches, 3 faint circles like thumbprints on glass. Barely there. If you didn't know, you'd miss them. I parked at the end of the road and waited. Cold air leaked into the car through seams I couldn't see. Fog climbed off the river in slow folds. I turned off the heater and cracked the window. Somewhere, a rooster made the mistake of calling dawn too early. My phone buzzed. Lauren asked if she should keep the porch light on. I told her to sleep, that I had the milk, and I'd be quiet coming in. I let the quiet settle. The valley held it like a bowl. A truck downshifted far off. A small animal moved along the ditch and froze when it noticed me. The scar of the road lifted a faint gray from the dark. I wasn't expecting anything. I tried to keep my body honest about that. At 1:23 by the dash clock, a point eased above the north ridge. Not bright, not flaring. It stepped into view. My first thought was aircraft. Second was star. Third didn't find a word. That third feeling is the one I've learned to follow. 2 more joined. They hung in a flat pattern, then rotated without trading places, like the whole set sat on a plate that turned. They drifted toward the river and froze above the trees. The color wasn't a color I can name. White's wrong. It felt like door crack light from a room with no lamp. I rolled the window down and started my phone recording, because habit saved more people than luck ever has. The car's sound thinned. The fan had been a bed of insects. The insects were gone. The tick of the dash clock turned into a metronome. I could hear my own tongue move. My thumb squeaked against the leather wheel. The lights left their flat plane and stacked, then spread again like they were checking their work. They came closer. The air felt dense without weight. My left ear popped. A note sat at the edge of hearing and asked if I'd meet it halfway. I didn't open the door. I kept my hands visible, palms on the wheel like I might with a large animal. The three stopped over the road and held. For a second, I thought I saw darker shapes inside the glow, like each light was a skin over something else. Road paint threw up a thin stripe of reflection under them. A voice spoke. It didn't come through the window. It didn't come through the phone. It landed in my mind.
We're here when you're quiet.
It didn't sound human, but it was still language. Cold and clean, like touching a shaded handrail in winter. Another followed.
We use the parts you don't hear.
I tried to answer and felt my throat work with nothing leaving. The clock ticked like a timer. The lights tilted and flattened with a motion that felt curious. Headlights turned onto the road behind me. The 3 points snapped back like beads yanked on a string. The other car's high beams filled my mirrors. The lights over the road winked out and the night closed. The driver gave me the valley wave and didn't glance up. I stayed put for a long while. Fog curled across the ditch. The rooster gave up. The room inside my head where that voice had landed stayed open and drafty. I rolled the window up and all the regular sounds came back at once like a train had been idling behind a wall. My hands shook on the wheel. I let them. If a story doesn't leave a tremor in your body, it probably didn't come close enough. The next morning I asked Alma about missing time. There was a report from a couple who said an hour vanished on their way back from a movie. She said there were 2 more. And one from a teenager who woke up in his barn with muddy feet and 3 triangle bruises on his shoulder that faded in a pattern he drew from memory. She didn't file that last one. She didn't want to face the boy's mother at church with a copy in her hand. A ham operator named Dennis kept spiral notebooks full of signal logs. He'd drawn bands like contour lines on a topographic map. He ran a finger along dips where his rig went blind at the same time his neighbors reported lights over the ridge. He's done this long enough to know what the ionosphere does when weather rolls in.
This wasn't that,
he said.
I've got charts for weather, I've got charts for sunspots. This was like somebody put a hand over my ears.
A woman from the co-op kept a ring binder full of livestock incidents. She tapped pages with notes about animals found empty and clean. No footprints, no fence damage. She'd filed them under animal death, unknown cause, and then added a sticky note that said, pending until someone gives me a box with more honest words. The deeper I went, the more the shape held. Lights moving in ways aircraft don't. Animals found without blood and without a mess that explains it. Kids writing messages in clear, quiet hands. An official memo that refused to call anything by the witness's name but still admitted something was there. A tape that carried breath the camera had no business catching. I kept thinking about how that voice arrived. It didn't push, it didn't coax. It announced itself, then left the door open. No sermon, no threat. It felt like a field test, just enough to sort out who hears and who doesn't. On my last day in the valley, I stood at the bend where the granite seam shows through like a wound that never bleeds. The water ran low enough that I could see hand-set stones from an old bridge. A blue heron moved through the shallows with the right to be here written all over it. I thought about the deputy's triangle, Buck's wrong lanterns, Lila's kids and their gray figure with a line for a mouth. Wind shifted and carried wood smoke and a sweetness that had to be apple butter from some kitchen I couldn't see. A pickup rattled the planks on the bridge. A dog barked at a thing it wouldn't describe. The valley held its breath for a beat and let it go. Back home, after Emma fell asleep and Lauren asked me for the pieces that wouldn't keep her up, I set the portable TV on my desk and played the Rivers tape again. The room thinned the same way it had in the township. When the screen went black, the breath came. Close. Proud. New. I felt it on my cheek the way you feel a draft in a house with every window shut. I held my phone by the speaker to capture the sound. The waveform rose in soft hills. The breathing steadied. In the middle there was a hitch. Not a human throat, not a pump. Something learning how to live in a space that wasn't home and realizing it could. I stopped the tape and sat in the dark until the house felt like itself again. The window showed the edge of our clearing and the trees beyond it like black stitching against a darker sky. I felt the tremor run out of my hands. If you live in Greystone, you don't need me to pick a word for what you've seen. If you've watched 3 lights where you expected one, you already know language is a fence for cattle and some things walk straight through. They don't leave a gate swinging. They don't leave prints in frost. They show up in your teeth and mind. They speak without sound. They wait until you're quiet. The memo called them anomalies. The farm logs called them losses. The nurse wrote visitors, crossed it out and wrote it again. The tape doesn't use any word. It gives you breath and a sense of someone practicing a skill beside your ear. I've learned to sit still when a room goes thin. I've learned to roll the window down and keep my hands plain to see. Curiosity isn't safety, but it's one way to live without lying. If you ask what the Greystone lights are, I'll tell you what I know. They're disciplined. They don't need to be loud. They arrive when the valley forgets its own noise. They arrange themselves like geometry's a habit more than a rule. They come when the air's quiet. I didn't plan to go back out that week. I went anyway. Curiosity's good at talking me into a coat and keys. Alma agreed to one more drive, then said she'd head home before full dark. We met at the lot and took her sedan toward the ridge gap. The day had that gray-on-gray weather that makes the whole valley feel like a room with the lights low. We stopped at a pull-off near the second river bend. Buck's fence cut a wet field into neat rectangles. The willow leaned over the slow water like it had homework there. Alma put a thermos on the dashboard.
I'm not staying past 6,
she said.
I gave it that much of my life already.
That's fair, I said. We waited. Cars hissed on damp pavement. A train horn sounded once from far enough away that it turned into a memory before it got here. A hawk hung over the open ground and then folded into a dive. Alma kept glancing at her watch like she was checking a stove back home. Do you ever wish you'd thrown the boxes out? She snorted.
Every time I can't sleep, I still wouldn't.
What makes you keep them?
Because people told me what they saw, and some of them looked ashamed while they did it. That's a tax. I wasn't going to make them pay it twice.
The light shifted and went a shade thinner. The hawk rose and cut off toward the trees. The car's interior sound went odd again. The room you're in is actually one step larger than you thought. Alma's hand tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't look at me. We both looked up through the windshield like we'd been trained to. 3 points sat above the road. No bloom, no flare. You'd miss them if you were thinking about dinner. They held still, then drew a slow triangle and slid toward the bend. I felt that drafty feeling in the middle of my head where the earlier voice had landed. I didn't hear anything yet. I kept both hands where they were. Alma whispered,
Don't invite them. Don't invite anything.
I won't. The points tilted. The left one stepped forward a thumb's width. The car's radio faded from a low murmur to a dead panel without a click. My phone screen went black and then came back like it had blinked. A tight note hung just above hearing.
We're near when you're quiet.
It wasn't the same voice. It wasn't a different one either. It felt like the same sentence spoken by a mouth that didn't exist. Alma's lips pressed into a thin line. She nodded once, as if some old itch had finally named itself.
Okay.
She said to the air.
Okay, I hear you. Go on.
The lights didn't move. They just sat there like a classroom of something waiting to see what we'd do. Then, as if the rest of the world cleared its throat, a pickup turned in from the county road. Headlights swept us. The 3 points blinked out and the car's radio came back talking over a weather update like nothing had happened. Alma exhaled and rubbed her eyes.
I'm going home,
she said. She started the car and pulled back onto the road like somebody leaving a church that didn't change them but somehow still did. I stayed on my own, parked at the river's place. The porch boards felt the same under my boots as they had before. The wind chime finally moved and caught a note that didn't belong to any key I know. I knocked. The woman opened the door and held it with her foot.
I won't play it.
I don't need you to. I wanted to ask if anything's changed since the last time you tried. She thought for a second.
Sometimes the breath is softer. Sometimes it's hard enough to rattle the glass. Last month, I got a second of a whisper right after the breath. I can't swear I didn't imagine it. It sounded like a word you'd get wrong if you tried to write it down.
What did it feel like?
Like someone leaning close to tell you a secret and then changing their mind.
I stood on the porch after she shut the door. The air moved across my face and had the bitter edge late fall always brings. Something shifted at the edge of the yard. Not an animal, a density. The kind of change you'd miss unless you'd already felt it once.
We're here when you're quiet.
I didn't hear it. I understood it. I don't know how to tell you the difference without making it sound like a trick. I put my hand against the porch post and waited to see if the wood would shake. It didn't. The feeling slid past me and settled over the yard like a sheet that never quite touches the bed. Back at my desk that night, I built a cut for my files. I layered the scanner calls over the paper rustle of the reports. I tucked the memo quote where it would do the most work and the least harm. I kept the river's breath short because I know where the line is for some people. You can stand near the edge without pushing anyone over it. I added the part from the car where the light sat over the center line and the voice landed in my mind. I wrote around it like you'd write around a scar. I kept thinking about the memo's phrase, non-ballistic motion. Somebody wrote that and then blacked out the part that said what they measured and how. Somebody else stuck a stamp on a folder and sent it where reports go to grow dust. Greystone kept being Greystone. The valley kept learning how to live with neighbors who didn't turn their lights on. A week passed. Dennis sent me a page from his signal book with 3 clean dips punched in a row. Lila called to say one of her kids had drawn the gray figure again and written, "We came when you didn't talk." Buck found a ring of grass laid down in his south pasture like something heavy had decided to sit a minute and then changed its mind. Alma left me a message that said she'd been sleeping better and didn't know what to do with the extra rest. I didn't plan a return. I went anyway. I told Lauren I'd be back before midnight. She told me to text if a road washed out or a deer tried to hold a meeting in front of the car. I promised. Emma's nightlight threw a small sun onto the hall and made the house feel like a ship with one good lantern. Greystone took me in the way it always does. I parked on the ridge lip where the valley floor spreads like a map. Lights from farmhouses dotted the dark like pins. Wind moved across the fields with a long, slow hand. I sat with the engine off and let the world find its quiet again. The first light came up gentle as before. The other 2 joined. They didn't make a shape this time. They held apart the distance a person takes when they're trying not to crowd someone. A sense of attention gathered itself like heat in a room full of people who stopped talking. I waited.
We're near when you're quiet.
I didn't answer out loud. I thought about the kid's neat handwriting. I thought about a pearl over Owen's hood. I thought about the breath on a porch 20 years ago and the way it still rumbles a cheap speaker. I thought about language and fences and how bad we are at naming things we don't get to hold. I set my palms up on my knees. "I hear you," I said, soft enough that only the air in the car got to keep it. Nothing moved. Then something changed. Not light, not sound. The space between the 3 points thickened like fog gathering itself for a trick I didn't want. A shape came forward in the sense that it decided to be closer. No edges, no limbs. My eyes kept trying to give it arms and a head and a body, and my eyes kept getting it wrong.
We don't use mouths.
The sentence arrived the way a thought does when you're about to remember a name. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel safe either. I felt studied. I felt like a new tool in a drawer picked up and turned over to see what it's for. I had a question ready. It didn't fit. What do you want isn't the right thing to ask a tide or a season. What are you isn't either. The only honest thing left was a small human truth. We're trying to live with you, I said. That's all. The shape didn't answer in words. The left point leaned and the right point leaned, and for a second the 3 made the triangle the deputy drew. Then the middle light dropped the tiniest distance and paused. The car's dash clock ticked, steady as a metronome that doesn't care what it's keeping time for. A vibration rode up through the seat. I felt it in my spine. Not dangerous, not kind, present. Headlights came again from behind. The same snap back. The same polite vanishing. When the other car passed, whoever was driving lifted a hand in the valley wave. I lifted mine back and watched the points tug themselves into the sky like they were tied to a place I couldn't see. On the drive home, I kept the radio off. I let the tires and the wind and the small parts of the car that complain when you ask them to work for free make their music. I pulled into our clearing and sat a minute watching the house glow like it's learning the trick of keeping us safe. Lauren had left a note on the counter with a drawing Emma did of a maple. 3 faint circles floated above it. She'd used a pencil soft enough to make them almost disappear. I don't know what the Greystone lights are. I know what they aren't. They aren't aircraft. They aren't weather. They aren't a story that stops when you shut off the tape. They're disciplined and patient. They pay attention. They don't need your ears. They come when the valley forgets its own noise and they leave without a footprint. If you listen too hard, you'll try to make them into something that fits your shelf. If you don't listen at all, you'll miss the part where they're already inside the room, breathing soft beside the microphone, learning a skill you didn't think could be learned. If you live out there and you're hearing this, you can decide what you need to call them. You can put your word on a sticky note and file it how you like. I'll keep the box safe. Alma will too. Dennis will mark his dips. Buck will walk his fence and count his dogs. Lila will keep a drawer she locks when the day's slow. The river's tape will keep doing what it does, whether it sits on a shelf or in a freezer or in the belly of a deck that still knows how to breathe something down and play it back. They'll come when the air's quiet. You'll know them by the way a room gets bigger right before it gets small. You'll know them by how careful you get with your hands, like you're talking to an animal that's deciding if it wants to be touched. You'll know them by the way your name feels, as if it's been picked up and weighed and set down without a sound. I'm going to leave it there. Not because the story stops. It doesn't. It stretches back to the 60s and forward to whatever we're building now with our better cameras and worse patience. It runs through a memo somebody wrote and somebody else hid. It runs through a field where a willow gives shade to things that don't need it. It runs through a porch where breath turns a speaker into a rattle. It runs through your chest if you've ever sat still long enough to learn how quiet feels when it has company. If you ever find yourself on the ridge with the valley laid out like a map and 3 lights sitting over the road, don't say a word. Roll your window down. Put your hands where they can be seen. Let them decide what they need from you. If they speak, they'll do it in the part of you that doesn't use sound. If they don't, you'll still know you were noticed. That's enough for a life, sometimes, being noticed without being named. They're here when we're quiet. That's all the proof I've got. It's enough for me.